Good morning and welcome to the WAVY Digital Desk. Today we're talking about AI in education. We're focusing on back to school right now as kids start school, especially North Carolina, and then head into school later in August here in Virginia. So a big question that people have is how AI will change education. Is it going to help? Is it going to hurt? Or what are some of the new ways that maybe we're not utilizing it? So today we're going to be speaking about AI in general, but also ChatGPT and what that might do for students and teachers in the classroom. Today we have Dr. Helen Crompton from ODU here. She is the Executive Director of the Research Institute of Digital Innovation and Learning, and she's going to be speaking with us about these technologies, what they are, and what you need to know. So thank you so much, Helen, for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Well, let's just jump in and get started with AI in general. Could you just tell us what is AI?
Absolutely. So artificial intelligence are computer systems that perform tasks that normally require human intelligence, such as speech recognition, visual perception, decision making. It does those things we typically connect to being human.
And I think for the most part, people think of AI and they don't believe that they might use it in their day-to-day. They sort of think it's separate, but that's not really the case, right?
Correct, very much so. Yes, a lot of people are looking at recent tools and thinking that that's AI and only AI, but it's got a lot of back-end things. In other words, we use programs and systems and we have no idea that artificial intelligence is included. All we realize is, oh, it's working so easily. It's making it so much more accessible and we can do things that we couldn't do before. And that's the AI working in the back end.
Right, and people do think their phones make their lives easier. They're sort of customized to them to a certain extent. But really that's AI, figuring out whether it's a map or social media algorithms. AI is mostly within everyone's, maybe not even day-to-day life, every hour, every minute of the day.
Absolutely. I mean, we go on to Netflix and it recommends programs that we'd like to watch. We go onto maps, like you said, and it tells us there's a traffic jam ahead. Or we go onto any other systems from social media to simple Google search. Google actually uses a lot of artificial intelligence in the back end to help us get to what we need. So again, we don't always have to know artificial intelligence is there. We just know it's making things easier for our lives.
Right, and the same could be true for the classroom, and we'll get into that, and there's a lot of different, I think, levels to that, and between how new it is. I mean, do people even know how to use AI fully, in these different school districts or different organizations? It's so new. I mean, how do people know what to do with it?
So it's an interesting one, and artificial intelligence actually came out in really the 1950s, so we've had it around for a long while. But it's progressed in what it can do, especially recently with programs such as ChatGPT. It's kind of come to the forefront. But you'd be surprised actually how much educators, especially in Virginia here and locally, how they're using artificial intelligence already just to even manage grades systems, things like that, having databases looking across to tell us more about the students, and even important things such as, okay, some students are struggling in this area. What is it that's causing that difficulty? And artificial intelligence can look across data that take us hours,
right,
weeks to do and actually provide those answers to us quickly. So acting like a co-pilot to educators already here at the moment.
Right, and there was a lot of conversation, in preparing for this, online, that certain schools use it to, they say, help with the busy work or help with these tasks that, yes, they are really important to education, but maybe don't need so much day-to-day focus.
Yes. Really, that's one of the big things about artificial intelligence, that teachers do so much on the back end. I think people have no idea how much work they do without being front-facing to the students. They have to sit in front of computers with the notes, writing lesson plans, designing all sorts of activities, assessments, assignments, and artificial intelligence can help us do that. and not do it for us. That's a crucial thing. It can do those things and then be reviewed by the expert teacher to say, yes, that's great, or kind of tweak it to make it perfect for the students.
Right, so that feedback element of it is important.
Very, very important, because the way I think about it as well is artificial intelligence is all brain and no heart. Our educators know the students very much so, more than the AI systems. They know those students very personally. So those systems kind of support in helping, but yet at the same time, they can't make decisions. Any AI should not make decisions for us. It should just help. The word co-pilot is often used, and that's perfect. It's kind of, educators need co-pilots, because all that time that they take away from the students, from designing those activities that take a lot of thinking and time, they now can be back in the classroom working, or out in the playground, rather than sitting in front of the computers doing a lot of that work in the back end.
Right, so it really will help possibly with time management and having that, yes.
Yes, very much so.
And, you know, these are ways that it can be tools for educators, and we'll get into ChatGPT as well and how that might be, you know, specifically be able to be used. But, you know, people do have feelings, whether it's helpful or hurtful, and I think a lot of people view it as harmful tool, and maybe that is just what education is for, and just having them learn how common AI is. But, you know, to people that say, oh, they don't want extra technology in the classroom, you know, they really just think it should be teacher and student, and you read a book and you write on paper. I mean, is that even possible? Is that necessary to have that separation of AI in schools?
So really, educators are phenomenal. Again, Virginia educators in particular are doing an amazing job. However, this amplifies what they can do. So it takes that great teacher to an amazing teacher. So really, there's no reason for keeping AI out of the classroom. However, like you said there, Sarah, it's really important to have education, because with these very, very powerful tools, it can create a generation of unthinking students if we allow it. So we need to be sure that we know what's going on. And even if we stopped it happening in schools, they're still going to go home and use these tools. So it's important we give them digital literacy skills to manage and understand what's the best way of using things.
Right, and then when I was in school, you know, we learned typing, and we learned, you know, how to work the keyboard. I think we went as far as learning, you know, Adobe products or, you know, Microsoft products. But now, I mean, how important is it to advance that literacy, as you said, and have children learning AI and learning what it is? I mean, that probably is a key to making it a better tool to use for them.
It is. So digital literacy is learning how to use those tools. What's nice is the actual product of AI is making those things easier. So where we used to go into like Adobe and we had to learn where to click and do all these things, AI is making that much more accessible. So for students that not, you know, aligned to computer science as such and kind of can't work on that thinking, these tools are making much more accessible. But we do need to kind of think about how to use the tools and learn how to use them. Also learn what not to do and what to avoid, because these powerful tools also have pitfalls if we're not aware.
Right, and then, you know, the education continues as well to the administrators and the educators. So they also need to be, I guess, you know, up to date with how to use it and the pitfalls, I guess, that they could also get into.
Very much so. And now this is a very difficult time, because we have a great heightened awareness of what artificial intelligence is doing at the moment with tools that are just coming out. But educators have just gone through COVID. And they've gone through the time where they had to learn lots of new technologies and new methods of doing things. So they probably thought there was nothing worse. And then along comes these huge AI systems that have disrupted education again. But that disruption is a good disruption. But for educators, we need to support them by giving them time to actually work out and learn these tools, because it's not that they automatically know it because they're a teacher. They need training, they need professional development to help, and time, that's a big one, to be able to work out these systems.
Right, and some of these systems, so, you know, for people, I think ChatGPT, that's been a big one that's been talked about in the media, from, you know, political leaders. You know, a lot of people are discussing AI in this specific, I guess it's called generative AI, ChatGPT. But, you know, what is it for someone, and there might be some B-roll playing, you know, throughout this that might show a little mock-up of somebody entering a question in. But, you know, what is ChatGPT?
So the way to think about it is, we're all familiar with Google search, where you have the little box in the middle and you ask it a question or to find something. And what we get from Google search is it sends us to websites where we can go and find the answer. ChatGPT is very similar format in that it has a bar, we type in what it wants it to do or the question we have, but instead of sending us to the website, it tells us directly the answers we're looking for in text, typically in tables and things like that. So it tells us directly. So it's much simpler to use than Google in many ways, that we can't always find out what we need from the websites, but it just provides that direct to us. So it's very accessible for any user.
And, you know, I guess in terms of it being factually correct, I mean, can it be trusted from the algorithms? Can you take the word as fact and sort of move forward with your day?
So the way I think of it, it's like talking to an expert person. They get most of it right, but there are some things that they're going to get wrong. And it has what's called a funny term, hallucinations. So ChatGPT can hallucinate by, it'll give you an answer and it'll look a very plausible answer, but it's not true. For example, I asked it, what's the world record for walking across the English Channel? Which we know, obviously, it's a large body of water and it's impossible, but it gave me the answer. This George Rife in 2016 did it in 12 hours, 10 minutes. But then followed up with all these answers about what the English Channel is that are actually factual. So we know that's not true, but we have to be very careful. With anything, with the internet, we have to fact check and not just take it as absolute.
Right, and then, you know, as these softwares progress, I mean, maybe some of those pitfalls maybe on the side of the engineers and people making it. Is that something that can be developed over time and manipulated and adjusted to be more factually correct?
Yes, they're constantly doing it all the time. And even while you're on these programs now, you can say, no, that's not the right answer, or even ask them to check their answers. They ask the AI system saying, are you sure that's correct? And it'll go back and check. But these systems are being continually updated. What I really like about AI is, as a classroom teacher in the past, we used to have textbooks. If there was something wrong in a textbook, it was there for good. You couldn't go back and ask it to be republished. But with artificial intelligence and these systems, they are continually, day to day, minute to minute, being updated to be corrected for these problems.
Right, it used to fall into, it's the 12th edition, it's going to stay there for 2 years, and then we're going to adjust it. So everyone's marking with a pencil in their book. You know, that's interesting because you talked about this co-pilot idea, and while, you know, there might be some adjustments that need to be made, there are ways to, you know, have some sort of dialogue with it, say that's not, you know, not correct, or sort of work around it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you can. You can ask it to fact check what it's just told you.
And then, you know, in a classroom, you know, there are ways, and I think people are concerned with how that algorithm, because it can also write paragraphs for you and other things, you know, how that could maybe lead to children or students of any age, I guess, you know, not thinking as critically. Mm-hmm. I mean, in terms of the negative side of it, I mean, how possible is it for someone to put in a prompt, you know, from an essay, or put in a question and then have it come out and then you turn that in? I mean, what are some of the pitfalls there?
So the biggest pitfall of all of this is it's so easy to use. It's so easy to cheat. You know, you don't have to go around, have computer science expertise to hack into a system now to find test answers, or you don't have to pay someone to write the question and answers for you. This is very simple. A child can literally copy and paste what the teacher has asked them to do into ChatGPT, and it can provide that answer. So we do have to, as educators, think about new ways, and that's a major concern for many educators. But at the same time, we need to think about, as educators, how we are teaching. And if we're doing things that we've always done in the past, we're not going to improve. We need to think of new ways. And in fact, ChatGPT in particular is offering new ways. Things like it's a conversational agent. So just think, students can have debates with ChatGPT on a topic. And the critical thinking there is extraordinary, that they can have them back and forth. And there's just so many ways it can be used, even by students saying, okay, I'm struggling with study techniques, what can I do? And asking ChatGPT to help give them advice. Ask ChatGPT to give you critical thinking questions to do. So it's all how we're using it. We're at a turning point in education now that ChatGPT in particular, with its ease of use, can have a complete generation of unthinking students that just go into ChatGPT, have their work done for them and submit it to the teacher, to another side where education can be extraordinary. It can be full-on critical thinking, very accessible, equitable education with these tools as long as we use them well. It's understanding how to use them well.
And your debate example is interesting because that's one where it's really hard to find an expert on a topic and debate, right? And I think, we would set up perhaps maybe a debate or a mock trial sort of thing, but that takes a lot of work and a lot of planning on a lot of different students' parts and the teacher. So this could be, an example where it offers something for the student that might otherwise not be available, at least not instantaneously.
Absolutely. And I mean, think about the equity piece in this as well. Think about the students that go home to parents that have college degrees and they can help them with all sorts of homework they have. And then you've got the other students that go home to parents that love them so much, but they can't provide that homework support. They can't answer those questions. I mean, many of the viewers there probably have had their own students coming back, own children coming in with mathematics problems. And, Dad, can you help me? And they look at the problem and think, oh gosh, no, I can't. But ChatGPT can be that side person, not to bypass the parents, but to work alongside the parents and say to ChatGPT, here's the problem, please break this down step by step to help us understand how to work through this problem. So it's a great tool that can advance equity really for students for one-to-one tutoring. Just think about those families that have a one-to-one tutor, very expensive. Now ChatGPT can provide a lot of that 24/7 help on a very one-to-one personal level for the children.
Right. And, it's not something where you can just Google any sort of homework question and it always comes up. So, I mean, that's an interesting point, right? That's a way that the tool can be used to benefit students across the board. And I think a lot of people are focusing on the way students can cheat or the way students cannot learn from it. But that's interesting that it does offer this ability to sort of level the playing field, if you will, at least in terms of homework or whatever project it is.
Very, very much. And in fact, think about diverse learners as well, other things. I mean, you could even ask ChatGPT to write something in Braille. Okay, it won't have those dots, that you could feel. It's very tactile, but it can write in Braille. It can write in different languages that then can be used with students. A lot of teachers have students from different countries, and they're trying to learn concepts at the same time as learning the English language, which is very difficult. So a teacher can just go in and say, okay, translate this into German, French, whatever it is.
And, that accessibility is huge because not every teacher, is able to help every student that is multilingual or, perhaps is learning a different language in the classroom at the same time as other students because, we know there are some schools that offer smaller classrooms, but some schools have classes with 30 kids, and that is a lot to focus on one student occasionally, which is unfortunate, but it's just true, especially with shortages of teachers or whatever the issue might be. But that that could be used as a helpful device in the classroom to connect the dots, and actually where a student might not be able to learn at all. So offering that connection.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. It's a great tool. It's just we've got to think about how to use it. And what you were saying before is that it's a shame that I do see across the board that people are thinking, okay, if students are using ChatGPT, they're cheating. That's the message we don't want to be sending out to children, because a lot of children are very focused on their studies. They want to do a great thing, and they are avoiding ChatGPT thinking, oh, it'll look like I'm cheating, but it's not. It can be a co-pilot to learning. Like the children can go along to the computer and say, I'm about to take a class in this. Give me some key words that I'm going to need to know with a glossary of terms. Tell me what students often struggle on in this class, and so I can learn beforehand. Or the teacher just explained something but I didn't understand. Please explain it again for me. There's so many ways it can be used that are not cheating. So students should not be discouraged from using ChatGPT. In many ways, they should be encouraged to really transform and help them with their learning, because as all students, we all need help. Doesn't matter how old we are, we all need help. And this can be this side thing that helps us along.
And, it's interesting because, when I was in school, or, other people, that have gone through, different classroom sizes, that is possible. You're in a 100-person lecture, especially once you get to the college age. And, your teacher might not be able to get in depth with you on something, or you might have missed maybe what you said was a key term or something throughout the lecture. I mean, what a good tool to be able to go back to your dorm room, figure out exactly what the steps are and get more of that one-on-one that you might not be able to get.
That's it. And going to even a fun side of it, some students just struggle with the way we describe things. And we don't kind of connect to them on their level. Just think of the student that's learning like the Doppler effect, very complicated, and they don't quite understand it, but they like rap songs. So you could ask ChatGPT, explain the Doppler effect in the style of Snoop Dogg or whatever, and it will do it. Some students connect different ways. It could be explain the Doppler effect as a story to help me understand. So it really, when we talk about personalised, we can go to fun degrees of having it in whatever language, whatever tone, whatever style that actually suits our students' learning needs.
And then what do you say to a parent that's saying, I want my child to have a traditional education. I don't really think they need to finesse it, to personalize it to them. That might just not be where we are today, I mean, what would you say to a parent that's sort of, looking down at it?
Yes, and I can completely understand why they do, because there's so much media around cheating and problems with it. But really, in what it can do, those problems, the balance there of what it can do to the problems it can cause, especially when we're aware, is not equal. But when the students go into the workplace, they're going to have to know how to use these artificial intelligence systems. So, for example, if someone goes into the workplace and their boss says to them, write a quick summary of this, and they go away and say, okay, well, I'm going to go and do this. It's going to take me a couple of weeks, as they normally would in college. And their boss is going to be saying, well, no, I want it in 5 minutes. And we need to be able to use these systems to be able to provide those services that were asked for immediately. So we do need to have them all prepared to use artificial intelligence in the future, because pretty much every job is going to need it at all levels.
And this goes back to what we were saying before about, teachers and administrators being educated in the technology. I mean, some of the concerns we have for, the parents have for cheating or for maybe the critical thinking hopefully those are things that maybe can act as guidance or rules of how it can be used in the classroom. So while you might not be able to use it on a test, or you might not be able to use it in a paragraph writing or creative writing program, it can be used as what you called it, sort of a tutor of sorts, if you will, or a sort of helpful co-pilot guide in their studies.
That's it. And but we do, as the educators, need to be very clear on how it's used. For example, if a student's asked to provide a summary of something in their own words, they should not be using ChatGPT. So it's understanding and having it very clear to the students how ChatGPT should be used and any artificial intelligence systems.
One thing I did want to talk about, before we wrap up too, is, I used to have to use Turnitin.com, and I've heard recently, I think students still use that, but it is something that hasn't quite caught up to the technology, and I'm not quite sure if ChatGPT will allow it to at any point, but there are examples that say, a student might have cheated, but really they didn't use ChatGPT. And then I've seen it the other way around where, a student will use ChatGPT and then it'll say it's completely fine. So, I think that is an interesting dilemma if you use it, turn it in as, a fact as well, and you don't use it as a conversation or you don't use it as a tool. I've also heard of teachers using ChatGPT is fine in papers, but you have to quote it. So I've heard that too. But, what are your takes, especially as a teacher, with people using tools like this?
So as in the kind of finding out whether who's written it and the plagiarism checks don't work. That's my personal view, don't work whatsoever. Like you said, students are being accused of cheating when they're not. And there's lots of workarounds. For example, major organisations, plagiarism checks are saying we've got products that can tell if it's a human or if it's written by AI. But all the student has to do if they wanted to cheat was ask ChatGPT perhaps to write something for them, add a few spelling mistakes, and then if it's run through the system, it'll look and go, AI wouldn't make spelling mistakes, so it must be human. So there's lots of workarounds. So as educators, we just really need to think of providing different types of assessments.
And I've heard of other AIs in schools. Khan Academy was one that we use, and they use a version of AI. But, are there any other softwares that people maybe should familiarize themselves with that do use AI in schools?
Yes, and Khan actually have Khan MyGo or other versions like that they're using. But there's so much AI tools out there. I would say you don't really want to just go with one thing. What you want to do is you want to figure out what's your objective, what do you want to use it for, and then do a search on what artificial intelligence can there help. And there's two types, the way I think about AI. There's that front end where you can see it, like ChatGPT. Google Translate is a different one that many people might be familiar with, and that's working in the back end. So really by searching out, looking for specifically what you're wanting to do and having artificial intelligence help, that's probably the best searches.
And then, where do we move forward for this? So this is something that really has been a hot topic in the last year or so. It's been around, but, because it is more out in the media, is maybe that a positive thing that people are hearing it? Is it, it does need to be filtered maybe for, different education purposes, but, where are we going next, with all of this?
So I will say ChatGPT was the first. We are going to see it really skyrocketing from here, and it's already gone out into multiple other programs that we won't recognize it. It looks different, or it's in that back end, like I said. But it's all out there. And we have other programs such as Google brought out Bard, Anthropic brought out Claude, which is very good. And there's other systems, even Apple. Apple now has Apple GPT. Same ideas. So we've learned in the computer science, people have found new types of AI that has developed into ChatGPT. And now they've found that It's going to open up huge possibilities for many other AI systems. So we're only just seeing the first here. I will say this is a major time in education. We had 3 major times in education in history. We had the Gutenberg printing press, where we were allowed to print books for everybody. And so everybody could have knowledge. We had the internet, and now ChatGPT. So these are 3 major historical points. So we're going to see a lot of change from now.
Well, Helen, thank you so much for joining me this morning. And I think, it's been really interesting to hear, your terms of co-pilot and hearing sort of about some of the sides of AI and ChatGPT that I had not heard before. And hopefully, especially schools down here, and I'm sure they are taking it, seriously. And that's the last thing I sort of wanted to ask is, taking this seriously and not just looking at it like any other social media or technology that, might die off in a few years. I mean, how important is going forward for people to really take it seriously, to learn about it, to put it in their school guidance book or their rule book, or really, shape curriculums with it?
Yes, you got it, hit the nail right on the head. We have to take it very seriously. Again, it goes back to students are using this already. Educators need to quickly get on board and understand what it can do, as starting from the pitfalls, that cheating, to then look at ways that we can use it going forward. So everybody really needs to get on board. It's not something we can ignore. And any educator ignoring it is at the pitfall of end of term assessments, end of grade assessments. We could be assessing ChatGPT rather than our students.
Well, I'm going to give you the floor. Is there anything else that we didn't cover today that you wanted people to be aware of AI and ChatGPT, especially as we move into this year?
Yes, I would say that people need to get past the fear, and by getting past the fear is by exploring what it can do. If you've not been on products like ChatGPT, please, you don't have to have any experience or any knowledge of computer science. It's actually easier to use than Google search. So people need to kind of explore these things, and while we're going to have a lot of negative sides, we really need to look at the positive sides as well of how this tool can really transform learning.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me this morning. And, to everyone that's tuning in, please take a look at some of these platforms, take a look at some of the principles and guidelines that maybe schools set forth for this year, and we'll just see what happens, in the future.
Yes. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.